New York, the 40th floor of the Silverline Media Group headquarters. LED lights gleamed off the glass walls. Everything looked sleek and expensive, as if this were the power center of the media industry. In the large conference room, David Carter, a 29-year-old black data analyst, placed a thick stack of reports on the table. He had spent many sleepless nights preparing for this investor pitch. Every number, every chart held his only hope of proving his worth at the company where he had worked for 6 months. But at that moment, instead of professional focus, something unbelievable happened. Clara Whitford, the creative director and daughter of a prominent media dynasty, stood up. She held a steaming cup of Americano. Without hesitation, Clara flung it straight at David. The dark coffee splattered across his pristine white shirt and soaked into the pages of his documents. The paper curled, the numbers smeared. All those sleepless nights instantly turned into dirty brown stains. Laughter echoed through the room. Derek Nolan, Clara's right-hand man, exclaimed before the whole room, "How's that for the company's diversity policy? Free coffee for the quota hire." In the corner, Sophie Lang from HR lifted her phone to film the scene and added, "So on point, a vivid example of hiring by race, not talent, #quota life." David slowly wiped his face, refraining from the dramatic reaction they expected. Amid the chaos, his gaze remained unnervingly calm. Clara leaned in, her expensive Chanel overpowering the sharp scent of coffee. She lowered her voice, "You should know your place. People like you will never sit at our level." Behind the glass walls, other employees watched. Some turned away in embarrassment. Faces flushed, others smirked in approval. David quietly pulled out his phone and typed a short message. Derek laughed mockingly. "Calling Uber home, or telling your mom to wash your shirt?" David looked up. His voice was steady but firm. "No, I've just given you the most regrettable chance of your life." David Carter was born in Detroit, in a poor neighborhood where sirens and gunshots echoed through dark alleys every night. His father, a bus driver, worked 14-hour shifts. His mother, a night shift nurse, had swollen eyes from long hospital nights and caring for 3 children. In that cramped, small house, David grew up with an old math book his father salvaged from a library discard bin. The boy sat for hours under a dim yellow lamp, drawing formulas that astonished teachers at his underfunded public school. From those numbers, a door opened for him, a full scholarship to MIT. At MIT, David excelled and immersed himself in artificial intelligence and data analytics, fields seen as the future of digital media. Friends always remembered the thin black guy carrying an old laptop and a thick notebook filled with algorithmic symbols. When he joined Silverline Media Group, David carried a burning passion to prove his value through talent. But the company did not roll out a red carpet for him. They slapped him with the label "quota hire," hired for diversity, not ability. In 6 months, David faced every form of belittlement, ideas stolen, achievements credited to others. In meetings he was mocked for his appearance, taunted about his humble background. At parties and key discussions, he was always left off the guest list. But instead of breaking, David remained silent. He patiently observed, archiving every mocking email, every private chat, every sneering video. Quietly, he built a catalog of evidence, like weaving a web, ready to deploy. At the same time, David nurtured a secret project. In his small rented apartment near Brooklyn, he stayed up nights writing an AI algorithm that could transform how media predicts user behavior, a tool any major corporation would crave. No one at Silverline noticed. They only saw a quiet black guy sitting at the end of the table. But David knew, he was not the Ruo. He was preparing for the moment to flip the board. As coffee still dripped from the edge of the table and mocking laughter filled the room, David did not react as expected. No shouts, no angry table slamming. He simply sat upright, eyes glinting with something unreadable. David glanced at his Tag Heuer watch. The seconds hand moved slowly, its cold shine matching his calm. He murmured, just loud enough for everyone to hear, 15 minutes, the truth will speak for itself. Clara burst out in a sharp, contemptuous laugh. "And who do you think will save you? The janitor from downstairs?" Sophie Lang edged the phone closer to David's face. "Document this. Wait until he cries. It'll be more hot content for my TikTok." The room filled with laughter. But then, the employees behind the glass began to sense something odd. David wasn't suffering, he was waiting. He wasn't flustered, he looked like someone who already knew the script. His gaze flicked around, each breath measured and precise. Derek Nolan didn't relent, sneering, "You think who you are? Here, you're just a diversity number, nothing more, nothing less." David lifted his head and for the first time looked them straight in the eyes. In a calm, deliberate voice, "You call me a quota hire, but in 15 minutes, you'll see who's really living off their family's quota." At that moment, the atmosphere shifted. The smile on Clara's face faltered, though she tried to maintain her arrogance. Sophie stopped filming, her hand trembled. For a few seconds, the room fell silent for the first time. They weren't sure whether they were facing a weak target or a force they hadn't yet comprehended. David checked his watch again. 12 minutes left, and he remained silent, leaving them unsettled in that pregnant moment of anticipation. The second hand on the tag Heuer watch hit exactly 15. The VIP elevator light suddenly turned on. A ding cut through the heavy silence on the 40th floor. All eyes turned toward the elevator. And then, security personnel stepped out first. Right behind them was a man in a gray suit, walking slowly but radiating absolute authority. Richard Hall. His name silenced the entire room. Richard Hall, billionaire founder of Hall Capital, the group that owned the majority of Silverline's shares. A man most executives here had to wait in line just to meet. But he did not look at Clara. He did not look at Derek. He did not look at Sophie. He walked straight toward David and placed a commanding hand on his shoulder. "David, are you all right?" His voice was firm, yet full of warmth. The room, packed with people, suddenly fell into absolute stillness. Clara jumped, stammering, You know him?" Richard turned, his gaze cold. "I do not just know him. David is my strategic research partner. He is the one who just developed the technology that could save Silverline." A wave of whispers swept through the room. The same people who had laughed at David now looked down in shame. Then, attorney Adrian Cole stepped forward and placed a thick file on the glass table. He opened it, each page a damning piece of evidence, mocking emails about race. A group chat titled Silverline Royalty, calling David the trash picker with an MIT degree, and videos showing him being isolated in meetings. Finally, the large screen lit up. Footage from just minutes earlier appeared, Clara throwing coffee on David. Derek and Sophie's laughter echoing across the room. No edits, no filters, just raw truth. Clara turned pale, her lips trembling for an excuse. Derek slumped in his chair, deflated. Sophie fumbled to turn off her phone, but it was far too late. Everything was already out in the open. In that moment, arrogance crumbled. There was no more laughter. Only a heavy silence as the entire company was forced to confront the truth they had long chosen to ignore. David stood still, but his eyes were no longer calm, they had become cold. Sharp blades. He did not need to say a word, because now, the truth was speaking for him. In a room once filled with ridicule, now only silence remained. Richard Hall did not let the tension linger. He turned to Silverline's senior management team and declared, "As of this moment, Clara Whitford, Derek Nolan, and Sophie Lang are terminated immediately. All shares, benefits, and contracts associated with them will be revoked." No one dared to breathe too loudly. The names that once dominated this space were instantly erased from the system. Clara cried out, her voice choked, "You cannot do this. I am a Whitford." Richard turned back, eyes like ice. "Exactly. You are a Whitford, and that is the problem." Derek tried to lean forward, voice shaking. "We were just joking." But the video still played on the screen, his laughter echoing like a stain that could never be washed away. Sophie bowed her head, hands still trembling around her phone. All arrogance drained. Then David stepped forward. He touched the file, then looked around the entire room. "You called me a quota hire, but here is the truth. I am the creator of the AI system called Astra." The name sent a jolt through the room. David continued, his voice steady. "Astra can analyze and predict immediate trends with unprecedented accuracy. It is worth tens of millions of dollars, and Hull Capital has signed an exclusive license with me." Richard nodded in confirmation. Another thunderclap shook the room. Then David spoke again, this time slower, his gaze burning with resolve, not satisfaction, but more importantly, all profits from Astra in its first 5 years will go into the Astra Fellowship Fund to support Black students pursuing technology and media. Young people like I once was will no longer have to walk this path alone. The atmosphere shifted. Colleagues who had stayed silent now stood. Some apologized, some shook David's hand, some admitted they had been wrong to turn their backs. Finally, David turned to Clara. His gaze held no rage, only a cold assertion. You mistook calmness for submission, and that was your biggest mistake. In that moment, the room witnessed a complete reversal. The man once ridiculed now stood at the center. The ones who had held power now trembled on the sidelines. Justice had been served, but more importantly, David had turned humiliation into strength, building a future not just for himself, but for an entire generation. After the scandal, Silverline Media Group was forced to reform. They implemented mandatory diversity audits on all projects and ended the culture of looking the other way when racism happened in plain sight. Many new leaders were appointed, not because of famous last names, but because of real ability. The Astra Fellowship Fund was launched. In its first year alone, hundreds of Black students received scholarships, gaining entry into top-tier universities. Faces once expected to be left behind now walked confidently into the worlds of tech and media. David Carter became a symbol. He appeared on the cover of Forbes with the bold headline, "From Coffee Stain to Industry Game Changer." An image no one at Silverline could have imagined. The man once humiliated with a splash of coffee, now rewriting the rules of the entire industry. Meanwhile, Clara Whitford was shut out of the creative world. The doors once open to her thanks to her family name were now sealed shut. Derek Nolan was unemployed, with nowhere left to hide. Sophie Lang had to leave the city, her resume forever tied to a humiliating scandal. A year later, in a national auditorium, David stood before thousands of students. He spoke, voice low but resonant. When they poured coffee on me, they thought they were staining my dignity. But what they did not know was, they were watering the seed that would grow to change an entire industry. Hundreds stood and applauded, endlessly, not just because David had won, but because he had chosen justice over revenge. The final message appeared on the screen. Revenge destroys, justice builds. Have you witnessed injustice in your workplace? Share your story, and do not forget to follow our channel to keep spreading justice.